Today I wanted to briefly cover a local CCC camp in Pine Township in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. To do so, we're going to do a brief history on the CCC. The Civilian Conservation Corps, also known as the CCC, was active from 1933 to 1941. It was a federal program that was started during the Great Depression. It provided unemployed men with an organized and structured work program where they lived in a communal setting while earning a wage for their work, and they were able to send those funds or have them automatically sent back home. They got paid $30 a month, and they received a place to stay, 3 meals, and uniforms, true meaning of 3 hots and a cot. The program helped support families. The specific camp that I'm covering is Camp S-116. It was located on Crystal Springs Road in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. The men of Camp 116 assisted with the development of the state park locally, the S.B. Elliott State Park. Besides these in-depth projects that were absolutely immense, they also built, improved, and maintained roadways. They built culverts, cabins, administration buildings, dams, impoundment areas, picnic pavilions and campgrounds, swimming areas. They even fought forest fires. They replanted trees with extensive forest restoration. And in the area of Camp 116, that was a project. The area has been gutted by lumbering and was required to do some serious work to prevent any further erosion and degradation of the hills and valleys. Camp 116 is still marked with the CCC historical marker at the site location. There's a CCC Camp Road, which leads back to the area of the prior camp. And there's 3 additional camps that sit down in that area on state lease property. One camp at this location was the Boiling Springs Camp, which stands directly off of Crystal Springs Road at the head of the CCC Camp Road. This was built in 1923, before the CCC Camp, but during the opening of the CCC Camp, it was incorporated directly into Camp 116 till they left in about 1941, at which time a gentleman who was somewhat of a local legend himself, Howard Wise, leased the camp in 1946 and onward. The name was eventually changed to Spruce Manor, possibly in reference to the surrounding red spruce forests which were planted by the crews of the camp. Howard operated the Pennsylvania House at the S.B. Elliott Park for many years. It was a museum of sorts with an eclectic mix of displays, historical items found around the area, and it was closed within the past 5 years or so and cleaned out. The building sits at S.B. Elliott State Park and was built by the CCC. And it really is a nice structure, and if you want to see some of the works and some of the structures that they built, go to S.B. Elliott Park and the neighboring state park, Parker Dam. You'll see wonderful examples of all the work that CCC men completed. Camp 116 was considered the Clearfield Nursery Camp due to the location near the nursery. The first superintendent was Reverend Camerith of Houtzdale, Pennsylvania. Now, these men lived in barracks where they had to build the barracks and all the other buildings at the camp as well, which would include some sleeping quarters, a mill room or sometimes a mill tent, administration buildings, barber shops, and much more. When they accomplished the tasks of an area, they moved on to another site, and sometimes they disassembled the buildings to reuse the lumber at other locations, or in some circumstances, the wood was used to construct various cabins and camps nearby in that immediate surrounding area. That gives a quick history of who the CCC were and where the camp was located, what they worked on, and when they worked on it. So let's tune in to some of the video of my actual walk around the old site to see what actually still exists to this day. So today we're checking out the old CCC camp. It is S-116. It was 1938. Was the date that it became most active. The Civilian Conservation Corps itself was 1933 to 1941. And all through the forest around here, we are finding little structures, stairs that were left. It was S-116, located off Crystal Springs Road. And this cabin dates back quite a ways. Used to be Howard Wise's cabin. All of this area used to be a CCC camp. So Last time I was back here was years ago, and there are some signs here and there of the former camp. While we're back here, we are going to go check this out. So we have an old foundation for what would have been an old CCC building at one time. And steps in place. Nessie's going to check the steps out. Still some structure in place. Might look at some old maps and see what the layout was back here. There's some old box springs for the bunkhouse. And years ago there was a whole stack of them, so I see some are still left. It's pretty cool. And if you look all around the area where we're at, it's the trees that were planted by the CCC back in those days to rejuvenate the forest. And some more CCC stairways. Another structure. It was here at one time. Some stuff's coming up. And I believe this used to be the road actually coming in. Not the road that we came in on, which was over there. I do have the two hounds with me today, Nessie and Timber, and I'll tell you what, they're trying hard at tripping their dad today. So they're doing a really good job. Another front stairway going on up. Found several of those now. Years ago there used to be an old cabin down there, and I actually went into it a very, very long time ago. And they have since torn it down and it is gone. But right over here we do have some structures left. I find this stuff so intriguing, and sometimes I don't think that other people appreciate it, as they just see a pile of rocks and no history behind it. And I see so much history behind this stuff. So down here was the location of an old camp, and as I was saying earlier, I had been in it whenever I was younger. Stopped back here, remember coming down through it. It was in pretty sad shape inside, and too bad because it was a really nice log cabin. Getting an idea of where old structures were, and we can actually follow along. There's an actual foundation right there, sunk in. This is a road that used to go back around the corner. There was a camp that sat back there. Some old foundation sitting over here. At first I wondered if it was the camp, but upon looking at some of the trees that are growing up inside of it, they are far too old for it to have been the location where that camp was, as that camp was just torn down in the time that I remember, from probably the 90s or the early 2000s. I have a very cool additional fact coming up about Camp 116. And if you're a local from Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, you may not have heard this before. So it's going to be some pretty new information, and it's very cool. First, I want to thank everyone for watching our videos. And if you like, please give us a subscription, give us a like, comment, and most of all, please share these with your friends. Other details about the S-116 specifically. I'm going to show you a bunch of black and white photos for that camp. And it was indeed opened in 1933, early. It closed in 1941, but it was said that some continued to work on until 1942 in closing of operations. During the time of the 116, 2 full companies of men filtered through the site. The first company had close to 200 men. One impressive, and perhaps this should be an entire separate video, but one company that was stationed at 116 and had an exemplary record for cost containment, not always requesting extra blankets, articles of clothing, towels, excess food, etc. It is said that this company cared for what they had and treasured it because they came from meager means. It's also said that they did not request because they didn't believe their requests would ever get honored in a timely manner. Therefore, they inventoried their items far better and left things far more orderly than their counterparts, per the CCC administrators collectively stated in a signed document from the company 303C. So in 1941, and probably before this date, some companies had suffered from men leaving because the Depression was improving, jobs were becoming more available, and they were on the cusp of World War II, which would boost the economy and was already boosting it by supplying the Allies. Company 303C was called upon to plug those gaps and vacancies. Being a considerably smaller company, they were moved from Benezet to Clearfield Nursery and into Camp 116. Company 303C was out of Fort Boyle, Maryland. They were one of 6 segregated black companies out of 1,700 recruits who entered into the CCC service during the 1933 to 1941 in Pennsylvania. Projects that the 303 worked on at the Clearfield camp centered around the tree nursery operations of collecting conifer cones, hardwood seedlings, lifting, counting, packing, and shipping seedlings and transplants, making beds, and seeding and transplanting and weeding and general maintenance. The field planting of these seedlings and transplants occurred in the spring and fall. So during the summer and winter, the men of 303 constructed and maintained truck trails, roadways, and bridges, and also maintained the dams in the area. Company 303 was only at Camp 116 for 6 months, but during that time they accomplished quite a few tasks. Perhaps the best example of Camp 116 did not lie in the ruins of the woods surrounding the former camp, but in the history of the hundreds of determined men who went through that camp to provide for their families at a hard time in history. They took pride in the work that they accomplished, and the brilliant craftsmanship of the stone, log cabins, and the state park systems sit as a proud example to them all. Why look at these foundations when the beauty of what has been provided surrounds us, in the forest and in our state parks? What a crew in history. The CCC members should be proud, and we should honor their memories each time that we enjoy these sites. Thank you for watching.